As Xi Jinping gets closer to ultimate power, his downfall becomes more likely. Can he survive? Welcome to China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. Shh! It's time for everyone's favorite communist soap opera, General Hostility. Previously on General Hostility. China is in lockdown. The only thing more impossible to reach than zero COVID is zero power struggle. Chinese leader Xi Jinping must win the ultimate life or death fight against his enemies. But just as victory is within his grasp, Xi suddenly faces an even deadlier foe. A brain aneurysm! That's not bad writing. That's an actual rumor that's been spreading. This is on top of rumors of a coup sparked by COVID lockdowns. Yes, as we near the end of this season of General Hostility, all the soap opera hits are being played. I can't wait for the reveal of Xi's evil twin, who turns out to actually be Xi's arch-nemesis Jiang Zemin, who's possessed by the devil! Soap opera storylines are crazy. I love it. What I'm really hoping is the last 70 years in China turned out to all just be a bad dream. Anyway, sometime in the next 6 months, Xi will make a play for a third term as head of the Chinese Communist Party. But a rival political faction tied to former Chinese leader Jiang Zemin is trying to stop it. That faction has been using rumors, often conveniently spread by Western media, to smear Xi Jinping. The rumors really ramped up in mid-April, before an April 29th meeting of the Politburo, where top party leadership talked about enhancing internal stability. Here are some of the big rumors that were circulating in Chinese-speaking circles. Rumor 1 is that members of the National People's Congress, or NPC, wrote to Standing Committee Chairman Li Jianshu asking that the bandit Jinping be removed, which, if true, would have hurt his feelings. I'm not a bandit. I may be a dictator, a liar, a murderer, and a bandit, but I am not a juggalo. Wait, what were we talking about? The brain aneurysm is messing me up. Rumor 2 is that Xi will replace Shanghai Party Secretary Li Qiang and Shanghai Mayor Gong Zheng, both of whom are his allies. This is actually the most plausible rumor because Shanghai officials did screw up the COVID lockdown and Xi Jinping could be pressured to remove his allies. But that doesn't mean he's going to. And perhaps the craziest of all, rumor 3 is that Xi has already announced he will relinquish power and retire. Those are just a few of many of the rumors going around. Now, some of these turned out to be blatantly false. The Shanghai Party Secretary and Mayor have not been replaced. And Xi relinquishing power? Come on, that's not going to happen. But the main point was to get people asking, is Xi losing his grip on power? And that was a message anonymous Chinese sources began leaking to Western media. More after this quick commercial break. Welcome back. Hopefully from an ad, possibly from a black void left by YouTube demonetization. So, rivals to Chinese leader Xi Jinping are trying to spread rumors that he's losing his grip on power. And that's a message some Western media were all too happy to jump on. Chinese officials have implemented a wave of COVID lockdowns so strict they make Australia lockdowns look like Florida lockdowns. That's because China has a zero COVID policy, and that policy comes from Xi Jinping himself. Now inside China, there's a wide range of opinions on that, but the message being pushed in Western media is that it's a threat to Xi's grip on power. Here's a recent article from Financial Times. Shanghai lockdown tests Xi Jinping's loyalties in China's Communist Party. It says, more and more voices are rising in Shanghai and inside the party, especially coming from Vice Premier Han Zheng, asking Xi to force Shanghai Party Secretary Li to step down. Now that probably is true. Like I said earlier, Shanghai's Party Secretary Li Qiang is a Xi Jinping ally. Meanwhile, Vice Premier Han Zheng is part of the Jiang Zemin faction. Han and Li are rivals for the position of premier, the second most powerful position in China. This is kind of like that TV show Succession, if the people writing Succession were on all the drugs done by the cast of Euphoria. If Li Qiang were purged, Han Zheng is likely to nab the position of premier at the upcoming Party Congress. But speaking of current premier Li Keqiang, there have long been rumors of a split between him and Xi. We did a full episode on that back in 2020. Check it out for background. Now, the Wall Street Journal is the latest one to fall for it. And it is full of anonymous sources that sure are pushing a lot of familiar messages, like that Li Keqiang is helping press China's authoritarian leader to dial back some measures that steered the country away from Western-style capitalism and contributed to China's economic slowdown, according to government officials. Yeah, remember when China totally practiced Western-style capitalism under Jiang? Never trust anonymous sources. Anonymous sources say I look better without a beard. Lies! And Li Keqiang's fight against Xi is supposedly backed by some Communist Party officials who worry Mr. Xi has focused too heavily on adhering to an ideology rooted in Mao Zedong's socialist vision, rather than on giving priority to practical measures to ensure economic growth, according to people close to decision-making. Yeah, Xi is totally like Mao Zedong. Unlike Jiang Zemin, who created his own personal Gestapo and built up a massive security apparatus that answered only to him and his cronies. And finally, they claim frustration with Mr. Xi's autocratic style is boiling over, according to people familiar with party decisions. Yeah, I wonder who these people are. So the message here is that Li Keqiang and others are fighting back against Xi's delusions of grandeur and his attempts to become another Mao Zedong. However, according to Sino Insider, a China political risk consultancy, remove the framing, and nothing in the journal report indicates anything out of the ordinary. Basically, Li Keqiang, as the premier, the guy in charge of China's economy, has been making economic policy decisions. Those decisions are a shift from earlier economic policy, but these changes must be backed by Xi, otherwise they wouldn't have seen the light of day. Put another way, the journal article actually confirms that Li has been doing his job, and in turn that Xi is pragmatic enough to shift policy when needed. Essentially, these anonymous Chinese sources are playing the biases of Western media. You see, there's a problem in the West. A lot of people think Xi Jinping is the bad guy. And don't get me wrong, this guy is not exactly Mr. Sunshine. I've made a living pointing that out. But the bigger problem is the Chinese Communist Party itself. It has always been committing genocide and ethnic cleansing, and waging war on the West. That's been going on way before Xi Jinping came to power. Thinking that Xi Jinping is the real problem is like going to see a ventriloquist and getting mad at the dummy. But before Xi Jinping, it was easier for some Western businessmen and politicians to make a lot of money in China. And they're under the delusion that if we just got rid of Xi Jinping, things would go back to the good old days, where they could make money more easily. That was the main idea of the Longer Telegram. It was an anonymous report by the Atlantic Council, a prestigious think tank. And it was written by a former senior government official with deep expertise and experience dealing with China. More anonymous sources. It's called the Longer Telegram because this anonymous author wants to compare his report to the Long Telegram, an actual telegram sent by George Kennan, an American diplomat in Moscow, to the State Department in 1946. The Long Telegram basically predicted what the Soviet Union would do during the Cold War and laid out what became U.S. policy for dealing with it. So clearly the author of the Longer Telegram is hoping for a similar place in history. Now, I'm not saying everything in the Longer Telegram is wrong, but the author clearly says that opposing the Chinese Communist Party as a whole is a mistake, and that the goal of the U.S. should be to get back to a pre-Xi Jinping Communist Party. You know, the good old days. So clearly, there are Western elites who think that Xi Jinping is a problem, but the Chinese Communist Party is just fine and dandy, which is where all these recent wild rumors about Xi come in. According to Sino Insider, by leaking political rumors that are blatantly anti-Xi to the overseas press, the people familiar with decision-making could also be looking to signal to the foreign anti-Xi, not anti-CCP crowd that there is currently very strong opposition to Xi in the party and that the time to mobilize and coordinate moves against the Xi leadership is at hand. Essentially, they're trying to artificially build up hype, kind of like Taco Bell bringing back the Mexican pizza. No one's actually excited it's coming back. They're just trying to trick you into thinking you are. Which brings me to this recent piece. Xi Jinping scrambles as China's economy stumbles. It was written by former Australian Prime Minister and Asia Society President Kevin Rudd. Rudd speaks Mandarin and also totally messed up Australia's China policy by being a big fat appeaser to the Chinese regime. A lot of people think Kevin Rudd was the guy who wrote the longer telegram. And guess what? Rudd's message in this Wall Street Journal piece is that all of the problems facing China right now have nothing to do with a decades-old corrupt communist system. No. It's all Xi Jinping's fault. The economic problem rests with Mr. Xi and his pivot to the state. He has moved Chinese economic policy well to the ideological left. Mr. Xi has begun strangling the goose that for 35 years has laid the golden egg. It also criticizes Xi's Marxist-Leninist ideology. Rudd is living in a fantasy land about what China was like before Xi. But that perfectly summarizes the views of these anti-Xi, not anti-CCP China experts. They're fighting the symptom, not the cause. Essentially, they're trying to cure cancer with cough syrup. So is Xi Jinping really in danger? Is his third term at risk? Likely, all this will just convince Xi Jinping to move more quickly and more fiercely against his factional rivals to secure a third term. On the current trajectory, high-level purges or other political black swans can be expected to happen before a major CCP meeting in the fall. So the season finale of General Hostility will be pretty exciting. And YouTube is still playing dirty with us, so the biggest part of our budget to continue making the show and paying our staff comes from the China Uncensored 50-cent army. Fans who contribute as little as $1 per episode on the crowdfunding website Patreon, or our exclusive social media platform on Locals. As a thank you, I'll answer your questions at the end of an episode. Today's question comes from Ethan Baker on Patreon. Hey Chris and crew, I'm just wondering if you see China's current lockdowns and long-term aim of the zero COVID strategy as less of a COVID protection measure or more of a long-term biological weapons defense system. Since biological weapons have been around for decades, but countries couldn't use them because of fear of harming your own country. Ethan, are you trying to get us in YouTube jail? You can't mention COVID and biological weapons in the same sentence on YouTube. I mean, you can't mention COVID, period, and biological weapons, period, in the same sentence on YouTube, period. I think I fooled the algorithm. But yes, anyways, the idea is, does the Communist Party have some secret reason for pushing the zero COVID policy, like it's actually testing strategies for population control in the event of a biological weapon? To that, I gotta say, if their plan to stop COVID is putting up metal fences, China is screwed. Whatever zero COVID is all about, it's clear it's not about effectively controlling a virus. Keep up the good work. Really, I think what's behind the zero COVID policy is just the Communist Party's inability to ever admit it was wrong. They spent years talking about how great their response to COVID was, how horrible the United States' response was. But now, the US is mostly past COVID. And it's looking like COVID is only really a problem in China. So the party doubles down. Zero COVID totally works. The problem in Shanghai is they just didn't lock down fast and hard enough. And people keep trying to escape. It's never the Communist Party's fault. Thanks for your question and your support, Ethan. And if you want to join the China Uncensored 50-cent army and help us fight against communism, all it takes is as little as $1 per episode over on the crowdfunding website Patreon. That's patreon.com/China Uncensored. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.